Greetings, friends. I was filling out some information to become an employee at the company where I've been working through an agency. Now that they're taking me on as a company employee, go through paperwork, and it's a big company, so I guess they have to do their HR things, and there's a section here, mostly optional to fill out, but I did have to just skim over it, and earlier today I just couldn't contain myself. This was really cracking me up. Well, it was cracking me up. It was causing more reactions than just humor, but this is their self-identification for employees, for employment equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the ruling regime for decades now. It says they're looking for information about designated groups like women, indigenous people, persons with disabilities, and members of visible minorities. Well, that's pretty much everyone except for you-know-who. Members of visible minorities. According to the Employment Equity Act, members of visible minorities means persons other than Aboriginal peoples. Well, that's interesting. Who are non-Caucasian in race or non-white in color. So again, let me repeat that. According to the Employment Equity Act, which I guess they're citing a federal law or a provincial law, probably a federal law. Members of visible minorities means persons other than Aboriginal peoples who are non-Caucasian in race or non-white in color. So this is in law. This is like anti-white legislation in law. In law, a person may be a member of a visible minority group regardless of their place of birth or citizenship. So if you're non-white in color and you're born in Canada, you can still be a visible minority because you'll get like generation after generation of status, because white people are condemned for perpetuity. Examples of visible minorities include, but are not limited to, South Asian, Chinese, Black, Filipino, Latin American, Arab, oh god, Southeast Asian, West Asian, Korean, Japanese, people of mixed origin. That's it. I mean, those are their examples. Nothing, well, obviously they said, if you're Caucasian, you don't count. If you're white, you don't count. So the funny thing is that this factory where I work, there's about 1,000 people, about 1,000 production workers, as they would be called. And then smaller number of people in the office. But I've seen the company barbecue in summertime, so I had a good idea of who's in the building. It's a big building, and they all came out, and yeah, I mean, maybe not quite 1,000, maybe like 900, but it's around there. Because of the nature of my job, I deal with inventory and getting things for orders. I've worked in different positions, but I've been all over this building, which is very large, a very long building. Of all the people there, let's say 900 to 1,000 people, at least production workers, I'm the only white male between the ages of 20 to 40 in this entire facility, at least in the production area. The guys doing labor, making things, moving things, that kind of thing. The actual, meat and potatoes of the business. There are no other white males between 20 to 40. Well, there's no one under that. There's a few guys who are middle-aged or in their 60s looking to retire sometime. That's it. I can't think of any others. I've seen a few Eastern Europeans here and there. The fact that, you don't speak English as your first language, you're an immigrant too. Even those white Eastern Europeans that I've seen, I could count it on one hand. Most of the workforce is South Asian. I won't get into the specifics, but South Asian, and then there's a large number of East Asians, and then everything else is just everything in between, from Africa to South America to wherever. Many Filipinos as well. If I'm not a visible minority in this environment, then I don't know what a visible minority is. What could you possibly call a visible minority? Like when there's not a single other person of my demographic, like even within 2 generations, even within a generation of me, in this entire facility. And I know I'm just talking about my workplace specifically, which maybe I shouldn't be doing that on YouTube. Hopefully they don't watch this video and decide to fire me. I don't think they would, but I'm not trying to be negative. Overall, I'm happy and I'm glad that they're hiring me, but I'm just commenting that even if you went outside this workplace in the city of Toronto, yes, there's going to be more white people that you'll come across, but clearly we're less than 50% in the city. So I don't know at what point the Chinese in this city are going to be the largest group, or South Asians or Indians will be the largest group, because that day, if it hasn't come already, it's fast approaching. It must be. If you look at cities around Toronto, smaller cities, but still big cities with 500,000 or hundreds of thousands of people, cities like Brampton, Mississauga, it's still evident that white people are like a visible minority in Canada's urban areas. Now it changes like when you go outside the city. When people ask me where I'm from, they assume that I'm from somewhere else. And then I say I'm from here, and they say, oh, Canada? Where in Canada? No, I'm from here. I'm actually from Toronto. I actually work in this city. I was born in this city. But apart from that, and these two guys, I get along well with all different peoples. But in this particular context, we were unloading a trailer, and the 2 guys I was working with, one of them was from Burundi, one of them's from Jamaica. And again, I like these guys, they're fine, right? I mean, just as colleagues. But the conversation happened to be about, oh, would you ever work in some other part in Canada? Would you ever work in the Maritimes, in Nova Scotia? And then they were asking me about Nova Scotia, and I was like, well, I don't know. I went on a road trip there when I was 14, I don't know. But not many people, I was trying to tell them not many people live out there, and then there was this sort of impetus to ask, well, oh yeah, well, what is it? What is it about these places? Almost like a suggestion or an assumption on one of their parts, or both their parts, that, well, and I said, kind of to fill the gap, I was like, well, it's pretty white out there. It is, like, and that was the key, right? And they said, aha. And then one of them said, but they're racist. There's that word again, racist. See, racist, you shouldn't even use that word because it's a leftist word. You only reinforce a leftist narrative when you use the word racist. It's just an anti-white device. Don't even think about what the word racist means anymore. It doesn't even have a coherent meaning because it's used in so many different ways. But the function is anti-white. The function is to beat your people down and destroy you. But the thing is, they would assume that because the Nova Scotians, who have a reputation for being very friendly people, albeit they get made fun of for not, the stereotype is that they're very friendly, not the smartest people, they like to drink a lot, they're fishermen, but they definitely have a reputation as like the cream of old stock Canadians, certainly. And like there was that, during 9/11, all those planes had to land in Nova Scotia, and the stories that the hospitality of the locals was so great. So why would you ever want to paint the innocent Maritimes with that horrible modern brush that the left has given all immigrants and anyone who wants to think of themselves as not part of the majority culture? It's given you that tool to just use to disparage, to cast bad faith, really, for no good reason. Why would you cast bad faith on Canadians in a situation where you're here working? We're working in Canada. Don't you want to be in Canada, but you don't like Canadians? What do you want to come to Canada, but you wouldn't want to be around in a place where there's majority Canadians, old stock Canadians, because they must be racist. And the point I was trying to get to is that it's this assumption that if a white place is predominantly white, that must be because they're quote-unquote racist, meaning they're just bad people. They just hate other races, and the evidence for that is that they don't have other races living with them. I mean, you could just, that's absurd because any other country in the world, it's predominantly a certain ethnic group living there. That's sort of what gives countries their definition. Almost. I mean, yes, there's different mixes of cultures in other countries, but generally we have Chinese in China, we have Peruvians in Peru, we have Japanese in Japan. So, but we don't say, oh, those places are so awful because they hate other races and they're only like homogeneous. No, it's only against white people here. And even if a white person is clearly a visible minority, no, that the last thing you could ever do would be wanting to claim that status. But that's pathetic, and why would I ever want to do that? Why would I want to raise a fuss to the HR department and say, well, I want to be represented, and first of all, they would fire me, or I would just be told to shut up, and then they would fire me if I didn't. But second of all, why would I want to do that? Because that's pathetic. That's just not honorable. Hasta luego, amigos.